Bucklin Brook. It's a 3-part walk. Starts here today at Oak Grove Cemetery. Next Saturday, we'll be over by the stadium. Then the following Saturday, we'll be down in the lower part. There's a lot of information that's going to be coming. The best thing you can possibly do to get it all is to come to all 3 walks. So the next 3 Saturdays, we're tied up with this. We're in beautiful Oak Grove Cemetery. Unfortunately, the story is not always pretty. There's going to be some things that, it's just not a pretty story. It has its good points, but it is what it is. And we're gonna do our best to fix it. So our group, Friends of the 10 Mile in Bucklin Brook, started life as Friends of the 10 Mile. We were mainly based out of Attleboro and the Massachusetts section of the 10 Mile River for our first few years of existence. We're made up of people, some of us, that were part of another organization called the 10 Mile River Watershed Alliance, which no longer exists. That was also based out of Attleboro. And that went until the early 2000s. And we got together in 2018 and made Friends of the 10 Mile, which grew very, very quickly. We had a cemetery of our own that we were taking care of in Attleboro. We still are, the Dodge Family Cemetery in Dodgeville, right on an island in the river. And it was last winter, the beginning of the year. Some of us, my friends Don and Nancy, they're the original 10 Mile River advocates that are with us. But we would meet for tea or coffee at one of our local coffee shops, usually on a Sunday afternoon. And it was one cold Sunday afternoon where we met up and we were talking about Friends of the 10 Mile. My wife and Nancy were probably involved in the conversation. Don and I were involved in our conversation about the river. And I still remember the light was fading. It was getting late afternoon. And Don asked a question. Where is the watershed line between the 10 Mile and the Blackstone watershed in Pawtucket? And my mind went back 10, 15 years earlier when I had a conversation with a friend from Pawtucket who is into the history of the city. And he informed me about a brook that used to exist wedged between the 10 Mile River and the Blackstone River that came through the city of Pawtucket. Nobody really knew where it came from. Nobody really knew where it went to. The only thing people really knew is that McCoy Stadium was built on a pond that was associated with that brook. So we started researching it, and we uncovered this whole story about Bucklin Brook that we're going to share with you in the next 3 Saturdays. And most of this, I will say, at this point, all these months on, most of this is fact, and it's not speculation. There is still some speculation, and we'll do our best to tell you what we're speculating on. But most of what we tell you is fact that we've discovered through all sorts of research. Pawtucket Public Library's historical section has been a huge help. The Bucklin Society.
Joseph Bucklin Society, if you go online, Joseph Bucklin Society, you'll find the site, and a lot of the history of the early Bucklin family in the 1600s in this area is in that site, and it really, really was helpful to us to start to put this puzzle together, this Bucklin Brook puzzle together. In fact, well, I'll wait till we get a little further down to say that one of the Bucklin family settlements was right here at Royal Square, somewhere in here. So we'll talk about this some more down the line.
Ask yourselves the question, where is Bucklin Brook? That's what we're here for. And when we were starting to piece this together, I started coming here to Oak Grove Cemetery. I've been a Pawtucket resident for many years. Never came to Oak Grove Cemetery or the sister cemetery across the way, Walnut Hill. But when I started coming to Oak Grove, I really started to see how beautiful Oak Grove was. This place especially really struck me. It's a beautiful place. And through that, I realized that there is a group that does take care of this. And the leader of that group was nice enough to join us for a while today, Mr. Ken Passo. I'm going to turn it over to him and let him say a couple words.
we need people to adopt these cemeteries. So when Ben said this effort that he's doing, we were like, yeah, another group coming in, another group that's going to walk through. And we want to see more burials. We want to see more folk coming in, because the more active a cemetery is, the less chance of vandalism, right? And if people knew about the brook, they wouldn't let it get covered over and demolished, right? So it's when things get forgotten and out of the view, and you keep the gates locked all the time, and you let things get like this. This used to be the Grand Army of the Republic's meeting place after the Civil War. And so when you go in here, you can see some of the decorations that are on it, but it's all torn apart. There's a drop ceiling in here, and we've been up inside. There's a beautiful bell that's up inside, made by the same company that Revere was associated with his, ringing of the bells and lighting of the lanterns. And so that's up there. Nobody even knows it's there. And we were ringing it for the first time like last year. And it's amazing the history that's here. But what kills me is all these people in here laid down their lives for us to have the freedoms to meet like we do, and we're not remembering them. So every year, we usually bring out about 300 school kids to flag in the different cemeteries. And because I'm a pastor and I'm not with the school, I can speak about what motivated these gentlemen to come out here and lay down their lives for us. Love of God, the idea that God created everybody equal, everybody bleeds red, and the fact that we would send people to march and voluntarily, because we were called abolitionists. We wanted to abolish slavery. And so that's why we do what we do, because I know that there's many believers buried out here, people who said, you know what, I'm tired of this, people shouldn't be enslaved, just for somebody else's comfort. And so these guys gave up all that they had to march down and remember and free, their brothers and sisters all over the South. And today that struggle continues. Ben, I'm sure, is not going to relocate graves to bring the brook back up, but in the process of them expanding the cemetery, they just plowed over history. And over here in Walnut Hill, this was one big cemetery. This, at one point, was one complete cemetery. And there was a fence put through it, right through graves, right through families' plots, right through the roads that were there. And so when you're talking to me about two separate cemeteries, Walnut Hill was actually one with this. And the guy that owns that now is actually burying people over people. He's been in court a couple of times. He's been caught doing it. In the Civil War section that's right on that side, if you look over here, you'll see as you drive by the streets over there, you'll see a dip that goes down like this. He was going to fill that with dirt and just put a mark. He says, I was just going to put a marker up here remembering the few people that are buried down here. That's where most of the Civil War vets are. So we were going down there pulling the stones up, putting flags on them, and he actually chased a reporter out with us. So there are people here who are not good guys, and there's people here that are good guys. The city has helped us refurbish what you see, but a lot of them are down again. Every time they mow, they knock stones down. We need people to get in and help with this effort. And if you're a parent, get your kids out when we do the flagging efforts. And we'll be out there replacing the flags and stuff. So that's what we're about. We're a group that's dedicated to remembering our past and appreciating our veterans and getting out there and making sure that history isn't buried. And in your group with the Bucklin Brook, that's an essential part of our history. And that's why we're taking time out this morning. This is near and dear to my heart, Oak Grove. And it was built in sections. You can see the old sections here. There's several Medal of Honor winners whose markers were abused in here, and we've got them back up. And two of them are memorialized right there at the front. They put extra stones because I guess they couldn't find the stones when they were doing their thing. And so at this moment, as we're about to go through the cemetery, just in honor of those that are out there now, if you could just uncover and let's just have a moment of silence and a prayer for those that paid the ultimate price so that we can even be here today walking around. Heavenly Father, I just thank you now for these excited people that are coming for a project here in the cemetery. I ask, Lord, that you would open their eyes to just the number of flags that are there. Lord, there's just so many people in here that paid for the fact that we're here today. Most of them did this because they believe that nobody's any better than anybody else and nobody should be enslaved. This is a huge Civil War cemetery. There's Korean War vets here and Vietnam vets and every other conflict too, but Lord, a great majority of these people are here because they paid the ultimate price for the freedom that we all enjoy today. So Lord God, I just ask that you would instill in us, and especially after 9/11, just a sense of what it is that these people fought for and what it is that we enjoy today. And help us to not only honor them, but honor you as we go through this place. And in all our conversations, help us to keep in mind the awe and reverence we should have here and the appreciation we should have for the veterans that we see. We give you all this. All right, thanks, guys.
The question, where is Bucklin Brook? It's a question that we were trying to answer, and we got the answer. Where is Bucklin Brook? You're standing on it right now. If you look, throughout the course of Bucklin Brook, and if you're not afraid to look at manholes, there are glimpses of it at times, not today, because we're up near the headwaters, but this right here is Bucklin Brook. And if you look, you can see the line of where it is. So as we walk, more or less, there's two things we're walking on top of, all right? And this is where it's very tricky, because we're walking on the course of the brook that was buried, but we're also walking on resting places that it's tough to tell without a trained eye. Pastor Ken does have a trained eye, and he pointed it out. So if anyone is asking, will the brook ever see the light of day? Not here. Definitely not. It's just mixed in, and you have to respect the cemetery first before you respect, and I hate to say this, before you respect a sewer. But unfortunately, that's what they've turned it into here. Like I said, it's not a pretty picture in all areas. There is some good news as we go, but I don't know. We came here back in March, right before COVID went nuts. Came here looking for answers. We left here with more questions.
Always.
That's the way it worked. I do know that we are in a sacred place, a beautiful place that serves as a historical spot. It also serves as a wildlife refuge, because the wildlife here is fantastic. This is a green space in the middle of a city. This is one of the best open spaces in the Bucklin Brook watershed. And I can see the vision that, you know, Pastor Ken is telling us about. I can see it.
I'm saying what he's saying here, open spaces. The last open spaces in Rhode Island are the places where you can lay on your back and look up at the stars and know that you're in an undeveloped spot that's been undeveloped for what, 400, 500 years with no structures on it. And that's what open spaces are.
That's what we have here. It's used as a resting place. And real quick, over here, there are old postcards of the pond. A pond, a brook. You can see. I've come down, I've compared the roads. It's tough to tell, it really is. One or two places had the pond. I think it was this one. This is the speculation I'm telling you about, how it's not all fact. But I do know for a fact that this is where the brook came originally. The pond in Oak Grove may not have been associated with the brook. Or there could have been two ponds.
The water fountain, yeah.
Or it was up there by the receiving tomb, which has been said many times. It could have been something separate, because this would have been kind of a park-like area, because cemeteries served as park-like areas in the early days. The brook comes by the mill. We're at the upper section. This is what I consider the upper section. It comes through the city of Pawtucket. Stop and Shop, where the old Green Hall Mill was. There is what we have different terms, it's called the manifestation of the brook. We're going to see a couple of those, and then there's the brook itself. We're going to see all of it after the 3 walks. But there is a manifestation over by Stop and Shop, a great big wetland, full of bird life, full of water in the spring, full of trash all the time. Something we're going to get to at some point. But not easy to make it into a walk. So over there, if you're ever behind the Stop and Shop, be careful. There are people camping back there. There's a lot of garbage. It's not the most pretty area, but there is a manifestation of Bucklin Brook back there, and it is clearly visible. But I would like Mr. Don Doucette to talk to you about the headwaters of the brook and where we found the brook actually begins.
Ben's given you kind of a local feel for this, but let's go north on the brook in our minds. If we followed the brook course roughly, we come to Stop and Shop up here on the Industrial Highway. Behind Stop and Shop, if you drive around back off the Industrial Highway, you'll find there's a wetland in the back. It's all trashed, it's a mess. That's one surface manifestation of Bucklin Brook that remains. North of that, beyond that point, the brook more or less parallels Menden Street or Menden Road here in Pawtucket. We don't know where it is there. It's in pipes, it's in culverts. But you can almost be sure that it meets the Sweden Swamp complex, which is its headwater. Sweden Swamp, as near as we can figure, is the headwater for Bucklin Brook. Sweden Swamp is unique. Under Pawtucket and under South Attleboro, there is a subterranean aquifer. And it's artesian, kind of artesian action. And that artesian upwelling of water supply brings the subterranean water up into what we call Sweden Swamp. And what we've discovered, or what we think we've discovered, is that Sweden Swamp in of itself possibly feeds into 3 different watersheds. We thought it fed a brook to the 7 Mile River, which was part of the 10 Mile River, which is. We know that exists across Route 1A in South Attleboro. But what we've pieced together is that Sweden Swamp, in its overflowing and its upwelling, has a southern flow. A portion of it flows southward across Route 95, under the railroad. How it gets under the railroad, we don't know. But it manifested itself as Bucklin Brook, the headwater of Bucklin Brook. And what we think and what we surmise is that Sweden Swamp also bleeds westward, that a little portion of Sweden Swamp flows to the Cranberry Pond area of South Attleboro. Cranberry Pond flows to Abbott Run, which comes out of Cumberland. Abbott Run is a tributary to the Blackstone River. So we've got Sweden Swamp, we believe, feeding to 3 watersheds. This watershed, the Bucklin Brook watershed, has been, let me use a term, has been treated like the runt of the litter. It's been designated more or less as a non-watershed. And its area that it encompasses has been delegated through politics and through the powers that be to a portion of the Blackstone River watershed and left at that. And that's the way it's supposed to be. But that's not so. This is a watershed unto itself. This is a true watershed. And what we've discovered, that just because the brook has been altered and covered and filled and culverted and converted from a natural brook to a sewer system, doesn't alter the fact that the Bucklin Brook area remains functional as a watershed. It's its own watershed. No matter how the water commonly runs out of here to Narragansett Bay, the common source that the water runs to is Narragansett Bay. And our third walk of the series will show you where this water from Sweden Swamp is flowing beneath our feet through here, and then it's going to follow the line all the way down. Back in the 70s or 80s, some of you may or may not remember, there was a group of environmentalists in Rhode Island who fought to save Sweden Swamp itself from development. There was a developer who wanted to excavate Sweden Swamp, fill it in, and create a mall. And part of our association with we have one person whom we know who talks to us, who was part of that battle, Eugenia Marks, and she was employed by the Audubon Society of Rhode Island for years. Eugenia is one of those people who fought to save, thank God, to save Sweden Swamp. And we have Sweden Swamp left today as a surface manifestation, in part, of Bucklin Brook. And even Sweden Swamp has been picked apart through the development of Route 95, through the urban development that surrounds Sweden Swamp, Cardi Brothers Furniture, the railroad, the rail line itself, the main rail line. That's a precious resource, and it has potential today to be a source for public water supply. So let Sweden Swamp alone. You've got kind of an overview of that area. It's left to you on your own to drive and look at Sweden Swamp. Collins Street in South Attleboro is the place you should drive to. And you'll see there's plenty of water there on Collins Street, next to Route 95. Somewhere, Ben, in the back end of that, near where Menden Street meets Turner Avenue in South Attleboro, there's a common outflow, which Ben was near there this past season until he was asked to leave. He was where he wasn't supposed to be. So, unfortunately, we don't have a photo of that outfall. Sometime we want to get in. If you find Pullman Avenue in South Attleboro and go to the dead end of Pullman Avenue and look across the wetland toward the railroad track, somewhere in there is the water outfall that flows here to Bucklin Brook. So now we've taken you this morning from the headwater, and I swear on the Bible that's the headwater of Bucklin Brook.
Definitely is.
And we've taken you down along Menden Street in Pawtucket, and there is a namesake street called Bucklin Street off of Newport Avenue. If you followed Bucklin Street off of Newport Avenue to Cottage Street, what does Bucklin Street mean but Menden Street? And Menden Street, we believe, is the parallel line for Bucklin Brook, give or take some crow fly. But it's there. It's in pipes somehow, we don't know. But here it is. It's come down past the Stop and Shop. You can go and see that mucky, poor little swamp back there that Ben and I watched very, very closely this past spring. We were hoping that during the big night period that we'd
hear and see evidence of amphibians that might be associated with the Bucklin Brook watershed. But the surrounding neighborhood has so degraded the environment that would support the amphibians community, say like the wood frogs or salamanders. The degradation has been so bad that that evidence seems to us not to exist. The homeless live in that wetland now at certain times of the year. So now we've got the Bucklin Brook here in the cemetery. We've given you an actual line, the manhole cover. There's a swale, there's a natural swale to the landscape. When I say swale, there's a low point. A low point. And you can see it going right through the open lawn over there. See that opening? That's the brook. And now, Ben, you're gonna walk from here along the brook. And and I'm gonna drive down, and we're gonna show you another surface manifestation of Bucklin Brook. It's a wetland. It remains a wetland. And it's where Ken Parcel has done work to recover the former cemetery. And we'll bring you down there now and show you that area. And let me add this. What we've discovered is the latent evidence of a game trail, an existing game trail. So at some point we'd like to put a motion sensitive camera, we've talked about this, and see what kind of animal life may be using that game trail. This is something a project we hope to do. And believe me, during bird migration this spring, various birds were landing in the little wetland and using it as a bird bath and drinking the water. So nature still comes to the little wetland of Bucklin Brook down here. This is a bird sanctuary. Red-tailed hawk perch in the trees. The birders come here to study the migration of birds. People from Rhode Island Audubon come and monitor the birds. That's it. I'll stop now. I'll turn this back to Ben. You walk with Ben. And we'll all meet down at the wetland down below here.
On the brook and where it crosses, one of the things to look for, I learned through my friend Tim from the library, is the double sewer on the roads. The double sewer points out where the brook is. Now, I can see it over there. There's a double over there. There's a double right here. This one right here is much more noticeable as you drive by. One of the sewers is the drain pipe. The other sewer is the actual brook still flowing underground. So look for the double sewers all the way down its course. From beginning to end, you'll see those double sewers. So, where is Bucklin Brook? You can see right here, there's a clear line that this brook would flow. We're gonna walk right down it. We're gonna be walking above Bucklin Brook. We're gonna be walking above the bones of the Pawtucket residents that came before us. Again, it's a sacred area. Think about it as we go. There's a lot of history right at our feet as we go through here. All right, so this area here, we believe this was a pond that you see in a lot of postcards. And the reason why we believe it is I matched up the streets, kind of where dawn is coming. If you look at the pond, you can see the roads turning away. Now, if this is the pond, there were a lot of gravestones directly across from us in that section there. If this is the pond that I found in the postcard, if I've matched it up, there were a lot of graves over there in that field.
That's a pauper section. That's where they bury the paupers. No markers. No.
And the one beyond the street, or
right,
this?
right directly ahead of us. We're gonna walk right at it as we go. But this is one of the possible locations of the pond. It's also possible, like I said, this is speculation. It's also
where the
possible
fountain is, right? Yeah.
that it was up there and that they didn't touch. So that's kind of it's going to be kind of hard to put it together. because things do look a lot different now. So, here's the main line. See? We're in line with the last one. Once, I was here after a heavy rain. This street right here was flowing, completely flowing, and the water pooled up here, and you could hear it splashing as it went down here. I've never seen Bucklin Brook through this, but after the rain, it came back, and it's washing over. Look, over here, this was pointed out when I took the walk here last time, you can see the depression of burial spots. This was flowing over. This right here, without a doubt, before the cemetery, without a doubt, this right here was wetland. This was filled. This was used as a pauper's area. Who's going to say anything? They're paupers, you know? They're going to put them right in the mud. That's what they did.
This is an interesting wetland. This is a wetland. What do we have here?
Is that loosestrife? No.
No, loosestrife is around the corner. Well, actually, this is goldenrod, actually, after it's flowered. But there's evening primrose here. See all these yellow?
Yeah.
Are you all familiar with evening primrose? Yeah? Yeah. Evening primrose is loosestrife in here. That's invasive.
That's associated with water all the time,
With
right?
water.
Yeah.
We've got grasses in here associated with water. We've got the
Is that knotweed? You get a lot of
Japanese knotweed. We've got
my
phragmites.
favorite.
We've got ragweed blooming in here. Goldenrod. Poplar or
Reed? You got reeds.
yeah, that's the phragmites.
Phragmites, that's always
And
water.
then the aspen,
Oh, the back rainbow.
the poplar or aspen. See the gray bark there?
Yeah.
Up top. Supposedly the natives used the bark for a aspirin type of derivative. The native people harvested that bark, or the what do you call but through here, in the dormant season, through this little part here, is a well-used game trail, right through here. And we have been talking or hoping to maybe set up a motion-sensitive camera like you see on TV and find out what's using this game trail over here. Foxes, what? We don't know. Deer? It could be deer here. We don't know.
Well, I've seen the turkeys. If anyone follows the Friends page, you'll see that I had a baby turkey posing for me last week.
Were they right here?
No, I'll show you where they were.
Crazy that they're in the
Are those cattails down?
It should be, it could be cat. Where are you pointing?
Just straight across.
I made one.
Those things way in the back with the fluffy
They're
things on
becoming,
top.
I was in Abington and I had
With the
like 20.
grass?
Yeah.
You can't
That's
do
that's
anything about it
invasive.
because they're
That's
considered-
phragmites.
What's that?
Usually
That-
grow where there's water.
Yeah.
So I had
Yeah.
they would roost in my trees.
Yeah.
And
You'll
I think,
you'll
one
see
quick-
that in the Runnins River.
Oh, lots of it.
Down
I think
to
one
it.
quick point about the wetland.
Go ahead.
I've been back there in April, March when the water flows high. The wetland actually consists of a stream. So it's a manifestation of Bucklin Brook, a very, very small one. It's not all of the wetland, the whole thing is wet. But it runs from the road over there. And I put pictures up of it. It's very narrow. It gets bigger over there. And it runs in that direction. It flows. It's flowing water, so it is a manifestation of Bucklin Brook. It is part of the brook. It goes drops down into that manhole somewhere, drops down into the ground, and then off it goes between Walnut Hill and the DPW yard. I'm sorry, that's all.
Well, you know, our walk is to hear the cemetery today, but when the brook left this cemetery complex, then it's going to the other dimension, the trip down to McCoy Stadium, and that's another segment, another walk that we'll do next week. But the next major thing down is below us is Hammond Pond, McCoy Stadium. But that's another story for next week. We'll continue walking with Ben. I'm going to meet you guys on the other side, up on a little rise, up on the hill, and we're going to look at a shipwreck stone.
You might not notice it. You have to really look for it.
Okay, agreed.
Dude, that tree with some balloons. Or that hidden gravestone right there.
This is not a gravestone. This is a hitching post. They would hitch their horses to this. This is a very old place. People have been coming here for a very long time. We're back in the old section of Oak Grove Cemetery.
What was this?
I don't know who the name is.
That would be for like horse-drawn hearses and things like that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. This was their road. And this right here, this is where I saw the turkeys on Monday. I guess it was still this week. And this is also a spot for cleaning when we come here. But this right here is the little trail. The turkeys were on that log right there and they came through the fence. And they allowed me to take their picture. But this trail here heads over into Walnut Hill. And there are actually graves that are in this mess here. But it needs some love. It needs to be cleaned. This is a possibility in the pond too. Or it's possible, like I said, if there were two ponds. There was one at each location. But this does appear that it was a pond, but at the same time, this would have been a very narrow area. Do you know what this is?
Nope.
Anybody? What this is called? I heard someone call it a crypt, a tomb. What it actually is called a keep.
A what?
A keep.
Is
A
there
keep.
like a dead body in
For the
And
winter.
it did exactly what the name says. Somebody dies in February, January. They had no machinery to dig. They dug it by hand. And they would usually dig the graves at night when the cemetery was closed. So if you were a grave digger, you'd come in when no one else was here in the dark and you'd dig your grave. Would you want to do that? No? But if somebody died in the winter, they couldn't get them in there. So they would be put in the keep for safe storing. Sometimes you'd have several different people in the keep. Sometimes a mistake would be made where the wrong person is going to the wrong hole. But most of the old cemeteries have this. It's also called a receiving tomb. It is possible that Oak Grove had another receiving tomb down the hill. And that's why they say the pond was by the receiving tomb. Because the pictures I've seen, and I'll reshare them, I'll send them to you if you want. The pictures I've seen show a big receiving tomb. So they could add another one that was bigger than this. But that's what this is. Drive around by the cemeteries, you'll see these.
And so there's nobody interred in there right now.
Nobody is interred in there. It was just to hold the bodies. See, there's no name on it. It just says the year that they erected it. Then the bulldozer came. Now we can dig the graves anytime we want, anytime we have to. The keeps are no longer in use.
And look across here,
like a fallen tomb?
you'll see buildings from the same era. See one they're trying to rehab? That's a carriage house. And in a state house, part of the watershed, Bucklin Brook watershed, goes up the slope of what's known as Quality Hill, where all the Victorian houses are in Pawtucket. The bound of the watershed goes up Broadway in Pawtucket, Sweden Swamp in the north, Route 95. The watershed comes down along Newport Avenue, and what Ben and I have discovered is that Newport Avenue is the dividing line, for the most part, between the 10 Mile River watershed and the Bucklin Brook watershed. If you go down Newport Avenue near Hasbro Toy Company and look either side of Newport Avenue, you'll see a barely discernible slope either way. And that slope either way is a division in the watersheds. And darn if it doesn't happen that Newport Avenue or the Boston to Newport Road from the early times, went right down the crest up the watershed, the division in the watersheds, leave it to the Native Americans. They discern that high point and put their early trail right down through there. And what happens? The English come, they follow the same route. They follow the native pathways, the native trails. The primary pathway between Boston and Rhode Island was actually Boston Shaman to Newport. Newport via Newport Avenue and the Wampanoag Trail down through Warren and Bristol. That. So the southern bound of the Bucklin Brook watershed is down around, just down below Narragansett, the old Narragansett racetrack, west of Newport Avenue, over to Columbus Avenue. You know where I'm talking about. Prospect Street in Pawtucket, the southern end of Prospect Street. And 2 weeks from now, you'll see that portion of what we're talking about. So what we've figured out between us is that the Bucklin Brook watershed is approximately 7 to 8 square miles total watershed. And although it's discounted and lumped in with another watershed officially, geographically and functionally, it's still a watershed unto itself. I don't care what anybody says, it's a watershed. And big or small, it doesn't matter, they all count. They all count in one way or another.
If you want to see a really defined watershed line, go that way. It's right before Broadway, which also would have followed the high point. There is a really well-defined line where you rise up, and you know all the water is coming behind you down to Bucklin Brook. You drop down, and you're now in the lower Blackstone River watershed.
Right. Yeah.
Very defined right there. Whereas Newport Ave, you can see it, the line between the Bucklin Brook watershed and the 10 Mile River watershed, which everyone believed until recently that there was a line separating the Blackstone and the 10 Mile, which there is, but not down this far. That's further up in Attleboro. But that line is a little less noticeable, but it is there if you look. To give you a perspective, we say about 7 to 8 square miles watershed from Bucklin Brook. I'm going to throw out some sizes for you. Smallest official watershed in Massachusetts is the 10 Mile watershed at 54 square miles. So the 10 Mile is draining 54 square miles. Bucklin is draining 7 to 8. How can the 10 Mile be the smallest when you have run-ins? We have Dali, the president of the run-ins group there. Well, Ken Postel's calling me. The run-ins watershed drains 10.5 square miles. And the reason why that is not smaller than the 10 Mile watershed is because they lump that with other streams. And that becomes the South Coast watershed, the Warren River watershed, whatever you want to call it. They put all those together. It's Narragansett Bay's watershed because they're just not big enough. Bucklin Brook doesn't really fall into that because there's nothing to clump it with. There's nothing around it. This watershed is bordered by the Blackstone and it's bordered by the 10 Mile. It really does stand alone. It is its own watershed. And hopefully one of the things that we do as we go on is we get this defined as a function in watershed. You know, where is Bucklin Brook? That's what we're asking. We want the public to know where it is. We hope that this is a good starting point for that. We've been sitting on this Bucklin Brook thing since about February, since I described earlier. Finally, we're showing it off, and you know,
when we discovered this and put the pieces together for a period of weeks, we've gotten past it. We were angry.
Yeah.
When we realized what we had stumbled upon, and I've been here all my life, Ben and I really had an emotional period of time where we were angry. with what we discovered. But I think we're kind of past the anger part and the surprise part to the acceptance part that it is what it is. It's been abused. And if the only thing we can use the manifestation of this little watershed for now, because it can never be put back the way, pristine the way it was, is to use it for just what we're doing now. We're using it as a tool to teach. This is a poster child example of what not to do to a watershed. So it's to point out to other watersheds who still have resources left that they can preserve. Palmer River, you know, Runnins River, do it, because you don't want to get to this point. This is the worst, I don't know if I should say worst case example. I'm sure there are
It's the worst one I know of.
other watersheds in the nation that have been degraded as well, that we're not aware of. But this is for us locally, you don't do this to a watershed. You take the steps to preserve what you have, or to enhance and to improve on what you have. That's all right, I'm done preaching, but
Well, as we go, we're going to tell you some examples. Doesn't fit in today. Fits in with some of the other ones. We're going to tell you some examples of what are the effects of what happened. I don't know if we officially said it was the 1940s when they started taking away this watershed. Bit by bit, by bit, by bit. Where we're going next week, they had this great plan for baseball in the city, which worked. It did work. It worked for generations, you know, but it's kind of funny that these things, not on purpose, you know, now the attention to this watershed, the demise of McCoy Stadium, kind of going hand in hand. They're kind of happening at the same time. The city is going to be doing feasibility studies. McCoy Stadium's, you know, what can we use that area for? And we're going to make damn well sure that Friends of the 10 Mile and Bucklin Brook are there. We're going to talk. We're going to say what's there. And there is stuff at McCoy Stadium that you're going to see next week. But we've gone pretty far over. A lot of interest there, which is great. We have one more thing we want to share with you over by the cars. A tree that is very old is a champion tree. Some of these old graves that you see, this tree saw them get put in. This tree was here when the brook was here, obviously. If this tree could talk, this tree would tell a lot of stories. Everything about it is massive. The roots are massive. The trunk is massive. The branches are massive. Without a doubt, this is a champion. Hundreds of years old. At least 400 years old, I'd say. Judging, you know, just from the layperson's perspective, knowing other champion trees, as I walk around, I would say at least 4. At least 400.
I was going to say at least 3, but yeah, it could be.
Well, I think of it this way. In East Providence at Bridgham Farm, you have the 400-year-old Newman oak, which is not as wide as this one.
What kind of tree is it?
So I was going to say what kind, but what I'm saying is this is a champion. I'm estimating at least 400 years old, judging from how wide. And in Bridgham Farm in East Providence, there's the Newman oak, which is 400 years old. They appear to be roughly the same size.
this is,
It's old.
I believe, copper beech. And you'll find copper beeches mentioned in European and American literature. Copper beeches that maybe even a work of literature titled Copper Beech something or other. But this tree is an estate tree. It's imported from Europe. It's generally associated with Victorian architecture. It's in keeping with the neighborhood that we have Victorian architecture here. We see Victorian architecture right through across the street. And if you follow the slope, the western slope of the Bucklin Brook watershed up toward Pawtucket Memorial Hospital and up toward Route 95 over here, that's a section of Pawtucket called, I believe, Quality Hill. And if you take a tour or go through that neighborhood, you'll find it primarily Victorian era, beautiful, stately Victorian era homes. So this tree actually belongs with the neighborhood. Its place is here, and this is where it should be. We lose a lot of these when developers buy estates with these trees matured, and they subdivide estates and they go in and they put housing. They interrupt the root systems of trees like this. And when they cut the root systems with machines, it creates a disease in the trees that these trees rot back from the roots. And you get heavy winds and all of a sudden a tree like this will go over. It's because we've done it no good through development. That's about it. I'll be quiet. It's used for carving. You can see lovers come and carve their initials.
It is, despite the fact that it's not native, this is a beautiful tree. I love this tree. It's probably the oldest in the Bucklin Brook watershed. Possibly the oldest in the city of Pawtucket. I don't know. That's not fact. That's speculation. This is an old guy. Awesome to finish off our first tour. Everybody's coming next week, right? Thank you, Cal. This is your registration. Where is Bucklin Brook? Part 2 is next Saturday, 8 a.m. We're meeting at McCoy Stadium for the middle part of the brook. You guys now know about the northern portion of the brook. I hope you'll drive to Collins Street, see the Collins Pond section of Sweden Swamp. I'm sure Don mentioned that Sweden Swamp is also part of the 10-mile river watershed and probably the Blackstone too. So that's a very special place. Go check that out. Enjoy this spot. I know Ken has asked you to do it. Now that you know about it, here for it. We will be here doing cleanups, and I hope you see its potential. And it's an awesome ending under the shade of this giant right here. Awesome cemetery, it really is. It has its issues, but it's a place that I've really enjoyed getting to know, and I look forward to its future. Will we see Bucklin Brook here again? Probably not, but we know it's here, and it echoes along with the voices of everyone here. This is a place full of history. It's a place to reflect. It's a place to enjoy nature, and it is a great open space in the Bucklin Brook watershed. So that's all we have for today. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.